The 3DS. Nintendo took everything learned from making the original DS, DS Lite, DSi, and DSi XL to make one ultimate...
So why'd they make the screen so small?
The 3DS XL. With 90% larger screens, Nintendo has done it once again by creating what is sure to be the model which cannot be surpassed by...
How come the speakers suck? They're not very good.
The new 3DS XL has the clearest, loudest sound of any DS model that has come before it, boasting the most impressive specs, improved controls, and super stable 3D. This is simply the best one ever made.
Did you know you have to take the battery cover off just to swap the micro SD? I mean, what were they thinking?
Welcome to part 2 of the 3DS hardware retrospective. Last time we more or less broke down the differences of each of the models and how they compare on paper, and if you haven't watched part 1 yet, I highly recommend that you check it out first. This time we'll be digging in deeper by finding out how they compare when you actually use them.
Starting with the original, on the top we've got a notification LED, outer cameras for taking 3D pictures and videos, and a camera LED that lights up pink when the cameras are in use. Along the front we find the recharge LED and power LED, which glow orange and blue respectively, and a headphone jack in the center. I really like the colors Nintendo chose for the charge and power lights. Over on the left side we have our SD card slot and volume control. The volume slider is a really nice improvement over the volume wheels used in the past. Around back there are L and R shoulder buttons, an IR transceiver, stylus holder, game card slot, and the charging port. Both L and R seem much smaller than they need to be, and the sharp edges of these buttons make them uncomfortable to rest your fingers against. The stylus is kept in the strangest place here in the back, and is a strain to get out when the 3DS is open. I do really like the telescoping design. It's unfortunately the only model that has it. Over on the right side we have our wireless LED that glows yellow, the wireless switch, and we can see the 3D depth slider. It's a good design idea to let us change the 3D effect whether the unit is open or closed. And on the bottom, there's nothing all that exciting, just a battery cover that requires screws to open and plastic feet. Inside we find the inner camera, rubber tabs on either side, the 3D screen, stereo speakers, and an LED that lets us know when the content we're viewing can be seen in 3D. The rubber tabs are supposed to protect the screen from making contact with the bottom half of the system from the inside when it's closed, but they aren't pronounced enough to be effective. The screen, while good at displaying glasses-free 3D, is just way too small when compared to how much space is left unused here. The speakers are surprisingly loud and clear, and it's a shame that the 3D LED can only be found in this model. I kind of like it. On the lower portion is the touchscreen, circle pad, control pad, A, B, X, and Y face buttons, power button, select home and start buttons, and the microphone. The touchscreen has a strange raised border, which I assume exists to help keep dust away. The circle pad is amazing and has a clever recessed design to allow the unit to close without it getting in the way, and is far better than the PSP's analog stick. The control pad does get the short end of the stick here since there isn't much room to comfortably rest your hand while you're using it. The face buttons are nice and clicky and have a premium quality feel to them. It's too bad that there's not enough space between them. Not sure why the power button is located here. It's far too easy to exit out of something by accidentally touching it. While I'm on the subject, why does the 3DS make me press an additional prompt to power off the system? It just seems like Nintendo really doesn't want you to power it off. The start, home, and select buttons are all grouped together and are hard to press down, which is really bad when you need to use start and select in fast-paced games. Seems like Nintendo took a giant step back on this one. Taking a look at the 3DS while closed, it does have a weird 3-layer cake thing going on with the different color tones, but there does appear to be a hard plastic cover that shields the unit from getting too banged up. Nintendo released the 3DS XL next as the first redesign. Not much has changed on the top other than the notification LED is now shaped like a line instead of a square. On the front, 2 different places have been added that allow carrying straps to be attached. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen a 3DS with a carrying strap on it. The recharge and power LEDs are also line-shaped now, making them easier to see when the unit is open, and the headphone jack has been shifted over to the left side. Moving to the left, we now just have the volume control. Over on the back, the L and R shoulder buttons have been enlarged and given curved edges, making the XL much more comfortable to hold and use. Here on the right, we can see that the wireless LED has been redesigned to match the new recharge and power LEDs, and both the SD card slot and stylus holder have been relocated here. If you're a righty, and not some kind of left-handed monster, this is the best placement for the stylus. It can no longer extend, but it is almost as long as the original stylus when fully stretched. The only change to be found on the bottom is new rubber feet that protect the bottom of the unit better when set on hard surfaces. Opening up the inside reveals new rubber feet that do a better job of protecting the screen when everything is closed up, as well as the advertised much larger 3D screen paired with much smaller speakers. These really do not perform well, and the volume gets nowhere near as loud as the original speakers. If you do manage to get a loud game to get the levels raised, expect to hear the 3D depth slider rattle from the vibration of the right speaker. The lower portion displays a much larger touchscreen, a new circle pad that has been redesigned to grip better and hold up longer, while the control pad gets more room to work with, meaning fewer hand cramps. The A, B, Y, and X buttons seem to be slightly larger, but still do not have enough space between them. The power button is now round instead of square and benefits from the larger housing of the XL by making it farther away and harder to accidentally hit while playing. The select, home, and start buttons are still grouped together, but they are actual buttons now and bigger too. The system has been overhauled with a matte finish to replace the original's glossy finish and comes away with a much cleaner, curvier look. Now for the redesign no one was expecting. The 2DS drops the clamshell design in favor of a wedge-like slate form. Since the unit no longer opens and shuts, lots of changes had to be made to carry over all the functions to the new design. Up top we still have the inner camera, but part of the trade-off involved ditching one of the speakers, which still manages to sound better than the XL's crappy stereo sound. The notification LED is now oval-shaped, and the screen can no longer display images in 3D, yet feels like it fills in the space better than the original screen despite it being the exact same size. What's confusing here is the circle pad. It appears that Nintendo went back to the original circle pad with the sharper edges over the superior XL circle pad, and the control pad feels a bit less clicky and a bit more spongy. The same can be said for the A, B, X, and Y buttons, and the start and select buttons have been moved to the right to match the original DS line's layout. The touchscreen is missing the rim around its border, and the home button stays centered below the touchscreen and is now more round and clicky but doesn't travel far enough. Up front houses a new sleep switch to get around the fact the system can no longer close. The carry strap has moved to the left side to join the volume control. Around the back you'll see a new oversized, curved, and concaved design for the L and R buttons, and the IR transceiver has been shrunken down over the game card slot, which has been moved to the right. This charging port lacks the contacts the other models have that allow the units to charge in a cradle made by Nintendo that was sold separately, so I'm guessing they never made one of these for the 2DS. Along the right side we no longer have a physical switch to turn off the wireless, and a second place for attaching a carry strap can be found here. Flipping the unit over reveals we can still take 3D photos and videos despite being only able to see them in 2D, and the camera LED has been removed. This model truly is baffling. No 3D in a line of systems called 3DS, using the slab design to make it more durable for kids, even though now the screens are more susceptible to damage since they are always exposed, and making the system so large it is actually more comfortable for an adult to play than a child. I'm so confused!
With the arrival of the new line of 3DS systems, we got some noticeable upgrades like Super Stable 3D, faster processing, built-in amiibo support, and even some extra control inputs. I wanted to get that out of the way now since I know that I'll probably miss at least one of those facts in the second half of the video. That's right, someone on YouTube admitting to being imperfect. I should probably check my locks.
Continuing with the new line of systems, the new 3DS on the top has gone back to a square notification LED and is the only model with swappable faceplates. The outer camera is still missing its LED, however. On the front, we see that the wireless LED has now been grouped together next to the recharge and power LEDs, which have all been reshaped to be less intrusive, as well as the power button being moved to a spot that makes it all but impossible to hit by accident during gameplay. We can get our stylus here now, and while it's not as good as being on the right side, it is far from terrible despite the stylus now being shorter. The game card slot has also moved down here over to the right, and it reminds me of when the Game Boy Advance got the SP redesign. Over on the left, we can see that the volume control has been moved to the upper portion next to the screen. The back not only has smaller L and R shoulder buttons, it also has the new ZL and ZR buttons that are frankly too small, hard to reach, and can be hit by mistake during frantic game sessions. The charging port is now centered, and we must now make do with only a single carry strap. Man! Over on the right side, we now only have the 3D depth slider. This redesign manages to make a huge blunder here on the bottom. While it is very cool that the battery cover also doubles as a swappable faceplate, it also hides the new location for the micro SD card, meaning you'll need a screwdriver handy whenever you want to swap it for a different one. Seriously not cool. Taking a look on the inside now reveals the new IR blaster right next to the inner camera that allows the new 3DS to track your eyes, which in turn makes super stable 3D possible. The rubber feet, which worked very well on the XL model, do not work so well here as the screen still manages to get scratched by the touchscreen rim. And speaking of the 3D screen, it is now bigger than the original 3DS screen by using the real estate on the upper section much better. The speakers are just as good as the original 3DS's, which is very good, mind you, and I like the symmetry that's happening between the volume and 3D depth sliders. That's a nice touch, Nintendo. Moving on down, we see the touchscreen, which is now able to read Amiibo, and the circle pad is the same one used in the XL model. Again, very good. The control pad will once again make you cramp up since there is once again less space to rest your hand, and the new C-Stick works well enough for strafing and camera controls, but I wouldn't exactly call it a replacement for an analog stick. The A, B, X, and Y buttons are now Super Famicom color-coded, a tad bit larger than the 3DS XL's face buttons, and they finally have enough room for my thumb to breathe. The Start and Select buttons retain their placement from the 2DS, and the Home button has its own dedicated space, which admittedly makes the rest of the bar where it's located seem empty. This model has a matte finish and remains the most customizable 3DS thanks to the exchangeable faceplates. For those who refuse to settle, we have the new 3DS XL, which up on the top has the square notification LED just like the standard sized version, but lacks the faceplate options. The front has all the same changes too, but has a fatter stylus that is longer than the new 3DS one, but shorter than the other models. The left side is the same as is the back side, even the shoulder buttons, which is really strange given the increased amount of room to work with. This was a missed opportunity to make a great improvement. The right side is the same as is the bottom side, including the horrible micro SD location. Inside we have rubber feet which actually do their job of protecting the upper screen, which is also much bigger than the normal new 3DS. The stereo speakers used here are the loudest and clearest of any 3DS model. Down below we have a much larger touchscreen, and the control pad will give you fewer cramps thanks to the added space. The face buttons still have the Super Famicom color coding, but it's subtle this time around. The unit has a glassy finish on the outside and a matte one on the inside. By now, you should know that if you see the number 3 replaced by a 2 in the model name, it means there are some big changes ahead. And just like last time, it's a mixed bag. Looking at the top, we've already begun to see huge changes. The notification LED is line-shaped again and partially hidden under the lid, and the outer cameras are nowhere to be seen. Up front, we can see stereo speakers that have lousy clarity and send vibrations straight to your hands if you have the volume cranked up. The stylus holder and headphone jack have been combined together, a nice look, but the stylus manages to be just as fat as the new 3DS XL stylus, but even shorter than the original 3DS stylus, when it's fully retracted. It is so uncomfortable to use it is almost unusable. The game card slot and micro SD slot have also been combined together into the same space, which adds a cover, something no other model has. This relocation of the SD slot is one of the best redesigns ever for the new line of systems. Over on the left is pretty barren with just the volume control, which has returned to the bottom half, and around back we are greeted with a modest redesign for the shoulder buttons, resulting in a better experience. The charging port is again missing the charging cradle contact points, so no cradle charging. The right side has even less going on than the left, and on the bottom we can see where the outer camera is removed to, but the battery looks more complicated to get to now. Onto the inside, there are now no rubber tabs or feet, but there are small plastic tabs that work alongside the rim going along the lid to keep your screen well protected. The 2D only screen is one of the bigger ones. This is an XL model after all, and Nintendo seemed very determined to have only the screen under the lid with nothing else. The bottom half shows the inner camera and mic have moved to the newly designed hinge, right next to the notification LED. The home button finally gets relocated to below the control pad, and without the extra space bar looking area under the touchscreen, the screen now looks massive. The C-stick feels easier to use now that the hinge is more or less out of the way, while the face buttons are color-coded to the accent color, teal in this case. The new 2DS XL has a matte finish with a cool accent color design. It's missing a spot to attach a carry strap, say it isn't so, and feels a bit cheap but still hefty since all the internals sit on the bottom half with only the screen on the top.
That was quite the deep dive into the differences within the 3DS family of systems that you can really only appreciate if you get the chance to go hands-on with them. Be sure not to miss next week's finale, where I do my best to objectively rate and rank each model. I can't wait for everyone who's going to watch it to completely agree with all of my opinions. I'll see you then!
Hey, thanks for watching! If you want to keep on top of the videos, definitely take a sec to subscribe. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, and Patreon if you want to follow me across the internet. Level 1 Sword also has a weekly podcast, so give it a listen.